The War Council chamber aboard the Zenith of Tranquility hummed with tension. The room, a magnificent hall carved from living crystal, glittered faintly under the pulsing light of the massive starship's bioluminescent interior. Seated in a circular arrangement were representatives of the most battle-hardened warriors from across the galaxy, a coalition of alien species forged in the fires of countless wars. All eyes, or the alien equivalent thereof, turned toward the central dais as the shimmering fractal hologram of the Supreme Commander materialized. Her voice, resonating like a low harmonic chord, carried authority and gravity. Today we welcome a soldier unlike any other, a war veteran from Earth, the fabled Deathworld of Sector 3-17. His exploits precede him, and his presence here is to teach us lessons born of survival on the most hostile of worlds. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Earth was infamous, whispered about in hushed tones across the galactic networks. A death world, classified as a planet where life clung on despite absurdly lethal environmental conditions, where evolution had birthed creatures of unparalleled ferocity. Few species dared venture there, let alone engage with its dominant inhabitants, humans. The doors to the chamber slid open with a hiss, revealing the man they were all waiting for. He wasn't what they expected. Lieutenant Commander John Marston wasn't particularly tall, nor did he bear any of the outward traits one might associate with the apex predator of a death world. His figure was lean but solid, his stride purposeful. He wore a tattered, patched military jacket adorned with an array of medals. His face carried the wear of experience, a grizzled jawline, scars that traced maps of forgotten battles, and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through every being in the room. He stopped at the center of the dais, looking around the room at the array of alien soldiers. There were towering, armored insectoids with chitin that gleamed like steel. Hulking reptilians with scaled hides tough enough to deflect energy blasts. Gasiform beings swirling in containment suits. Creatures whose species names he couldn't begin to pronounce but whose forms radiated deadly elegance. Warriors from the galaxy's fiercest species, all watching him with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Marston adjusted the strap on his weathered backpack, then spoke in a calm, gravelly voice. "So, I hear you want to know what it's like being a soldier from Earth. A survivor of a death world. Let me tell you a story." The murmurs died instantly as his words hung in the air. The alien soldiers leaned forward, their attentions hooked by his understated confidence. Marston took a deep breath. It started on a planet called Erebos 5. You might know it as a contested outpost near the edge of the Vancari Nebula. My unit was dispatched there on what should have been a standard mission: assist the locals repel a pirate raid and secure trade routes. Turns out, the pirates weren't the problem. A sharp hiss came from a reptilian soldier whose scales gleamed like obsidian. Erebos 5? That's a volcanic world. Toxic atmosphere, constant seismic activity. Few survive there long. Marston chuckled dryly. Yeah, that's about the size of it. But you see, I'm from Earth. And when you grow up dodging hurricanes, navigating quakes, and surviving predators that hunt you for sport, Erebos 5 starts to feel manageable. The chamber fell silent again. Marston had their undivided attention. He began recounting the tale. We landed just before dusk. The temperature was hot enough to fry an egg on your armor, and the air was thick with sulfur. Our mission was simple: escort the settlers to safety before the seismic activity increased. We had 2 hours before the planet's tectonic plates shifted and triggered an eruption. He paused, his face hardening. What we didn't know was that the pirates had left something behind. Not traps, not mines, but creatures. Bioengineered monstrosities designed to hunt anything that moved. The insectoid warrior clicked its mandibles, emitting a series of rapid-fire chirps. You faced bioengineered predators in unstable terrain? And you survived? Marston smirked. We did more than survive. We adapted. That's the thing about humans: you throw us into a mess, we don't just crawl out. We build a ladder while we're at it. These creatures, they called them rift stalkers, were relentless. 6 limbs, thermal vision, carapaces tougher than titanium. One of them tore through 2 of our vanguard before we even saw it coming. He continued, his voice steady despite the horror of his words. We didn't have heavy weapons, just standard-issue pulse rifles and a few thermal grenades. So we improvised. One of my squad mates, Ramirez, realized their carapaces were tough but their joints were weak. Aim for the knees, she said. We took down the first one like that, 6 of us firing in unison, blowing out its legs before finishing it off. The others learned quick though. They started moving in erratic patterns, using the terrain to their advantage. The audience was riveted. Even the gasiform beings, who were notoriously stoic, pulsed faintly in their containment suits as they absorbed the story. Marston's tone grew darker. The seismic activity started sooner than expected. The ground beneath us was splitting, geysers of molten rock shooting up like hellfire. And then the rift stalkers. They stopped hunting us individually. They coordinated. They funneled us toward the lava flows, cutting off our escape routes. One by one we lost contact with our outposts. A feline-like alien with sleek fur and glowing eyes leaned forward, its voice a deep growl. "How did you counter such intelligent predators?" Marston's eyes gleamed with a mixture of pride and grim determination. "We did what humans do best. We turned their tactics against them. I noticed the rift stalkers relied on their thermal vision to track us through the ash clouds. So we set a trap. We used thermal grenades to create false heat signatures, luring them into a dead-end canyon. It worked. Most of them followed the decoys. But not all of them." He took a deep breath, the memory clearly weighing on him. "Ramirez stayed behind to hold the line. She bought us time to get the settlers to safety. I don't know what happened in that canyon, but we found her dog tags melted into the rock. The rift stalkers were gone. She'd taken them with her." The chamber was silent for a moment, the weight of the story settling over the assembled soldiers. Finally, the reptilian warrior broke the silence. "You mourn your fallen. Yet you continue to fight. How do you endure such loss?" Marston's expression hardened. "Because every soldier knows the stakes. On Earth, survival has always come with a cost. We honor the fallen by making sure their sacrifices mean something. Ramirez didn't die just to save a handful of settlers. She died so that others wouldn't have to live in fear. That's what we fight for." He gestured toward the starry expanse visible through the chamber's crystalline walls. "You all come from species with long histories of war. You've conquered worlds, built empires. But Earth? Earth forged us in chaos. Every day was a battle, against the elements, against predators, against ourselves. That's why we survive. That's why we win." As he finished speaking, the Supreme Commander's hologram flickered, her crystalline voice breaking the silence. "Lieutenant Commander Marston, your tale is one of resilience and ingenuity. It is no wonder your kind is spoken of in both fear and awe." Marston shrugged, his voice laced with dry humor. "Fear and awe, huh? Sounds about right. But let me tell you something, we're not the monsters people think we are. We just know how to face them." The alien warriors exchanged glances, their skepticism replaced with something new. Respect. For the first time they began to understand what it meant to be from a death world, and why humanity's reputation was both a warning and a promise. And as Marston stood there, his weathered figure bathed in the alien light of the chamber, it became clear. The lessons of Earth were just beginning. The room buzzed with low murmurs as the alien soldiers processed Marston's story. They had heard countless battle reports, shared war tales, and studied brutal histories, but nothing quite like this. The resilience and audacity of humans, a species shaped by the chaotic crucible of Earth, was unlike anything they had encountered. Marston adjusted his stance, his sharp blue eyes sweeping the room. "You think Erebos 5 was bad?" He smirked faintly. "That was just one day on the job. You all have your war stories and I'm sure they're impressive, but Earth doesn't just test you once. It tests you every single day from the moment you take your first breath." The feline-like alien, its sleek fur rippling with tension, growled softly. "What do you mean? Surely not every day on Earth is a battle." Marston chuckled, a deep, gravelly sound that seemed to carry the weight of every fight he'd ever survived. "You don't understand. Earth doesn't care if you're ready for a fight. It throws everything at you anyway, storms that can tear apart cities, oceans that swallow entire fleets, diseases that evolve faster than we can cure them, predators that are smarter than they have any right to be. And that's before you add humans to the mix." The reptilian warrior hissed, its scaled tail flicking against the floor. "Humans are your own worst enemies, then? How do you survive when even your own kind is a threat?" Marston's smirk faded, replaced by a grim expression. "We survive because we have to. Because we've learned how to adapt. Let me tell you about the time I faced down a storm on Titan's Reach with nothing but a broken comm unit and a handful of rookies." The mention of Titan's Reach drew the attention of the gasiform beings, their containment suits pulsing faintly with light. One of them spoke in a melodic hum. "Titan's Reach is a contested moon, known for its violent electrical storms. Many have perished there. How did you survive?" Marston stepped closer to the dais, his voice dropping to a measured cadence. "Titan's Reach wasn't supposed to be a fight. My unit was there to escort researchers studying the moon's electromagnetic field. We were gearing up to leave when the storm hit. No warning, no time to prepare. Just a wall of lightning and wind that tore through everything in its path. He paused, letting the memory settle. Our transport ship was destroyed in the first wave. Half my team was dead or missing. The rookies who survived were scared out of their minds, and the researchers were no better. We had no shelter, no comms, and the storm was getting worse. The lightning wasn't just random, it was feeding off the moon's magnetic field, intensifying with every strike. The insectoid warrior clicked its mandibles anxiously. You were unarmed, unprotected. How did you prevail? Marston crossed his arms, a faint glint of pride in his eyes. We didn't panic. That's the first lesson you learn on Earth. Panic gets you killed. I found an old comm relay tower buried in the dust, half buried from previous storms. It wasn't functional, but it had shielding strong enough to block the worst of the lightning. We huddled there while I worked on rigging the relay to send out a distress signal. He sighed, the memory heavy in his voice. The rookies didn't think it would work. They wanted to dig in and wait for help that might never come. But I reminded them, Earth doesn't wait for anyone. Neither do storms like this. You adapt or you die. The feline alien growled softly, its tail lashing behind it. And did your signal reach anyone? Marston nodded. Eventually. But it took hours, and in that time the storm got worse. The lightning started striking in patterns, almost like it was alive, searching for us. The rookies were ready to give up, but I didn't let them. I kept working, kept pushing, because giving up isn't an option on a Deathworld. And when the evac ship finally arrived, we got out of there alive. Every last one of us. The chamber fell silent, the alien soldiers absorbing his words. For creatures bred in structured societies and ordered battlefields, the idea of surviving chaos on such a scale was almost incomprehensible. One of the bioluminescent beings, its tendrils flickering with curiosity, leaned forward. What drives you, human? What gives you the will to endure such relentless adversity? Marston's gaze grew distant, his voice quieter but no less firm. It's not just about survival. It's about protecting what matters. On Earth, you learn early that the world doesn't care about you. It'll crush you if you let it. But we fight back, not just for ourselves but for the people who can't. For our families, our friends, our future. Every fight is a chance to prove we deserve to keep going. The gasiform being pulsed faintly. And do you believe your species deserves it? Marston met its gaze, unwavering. Every day we're still here, we prove it. Earth might be a death world, but it made us what we are. And what we are is relentless. The Supreme Commander's hologram flickered, her crystalline voice cutting through the tension. Lieutenant Commander Marston, your tales paint a picture of resilience unmatched in the galaxy. Yet it begs the question, how much of your survival is skill and how much is sheer stubbornness? Marston chuckled again, a faint spark of humor in his eyes. Probably a bit of both. But isn't that what makes us human? We're stubborn enough to try even when the odds are against us. And sometimes that's all it takes. The alien soldiers exchanged glances, their skepticism giving way to something else. Respect. Marston had done more than share stories, he had shown them what it meant to survive, not just as a soldier but as a human from Earth. And as he stood there, his figure framed by the pulsing light of the chamber, it was clear that the lessons of Deathworld resilience were far from over. The tension in the chamber thickened as Marston leaned back slightly, his weathered hands resting on his belt. His scars seemed to glow faintly under the pulsating light of the chamber's bioluminescence, like etchings of an untold history carved into human skin. The alien soldiers had stopped fidgeting, their collective attention locked on the human whose tales were reshaping their understanding of war, resilience, and survival. Marston's voice broke the heavy silence, low and unyielding. Titan's reach was a storm, yes. Erebos 5 was fire and teeth. But what came after that? It wasn't a battle against a planet, but against an enemy far more dangerous. Sometimes it's not the hostile worlds that test you. It's the things lurking in the darkness between the stars. The insectoid warrior clicked its mandibles, a sharp and rapid staccato. You speak of the abyss? The uncharted sectors? Few return from there. Those who do return, broken. Marston's face hardened, his eyes narrowing. Yeah, the abyss. A void in every sense of the word. No stars, no heat signatures, no markers, just blackness. Nothing grows there. Nothing lives. Or so we thought. The feline-like alien flicked its tail nervously, the glow of its eyes dimming slightly. What could possibly take you to the abyss? Your species values its survival. That region of space is where hope goes to die. Marston's jaw tensed, and for a moment, it looked as though he might not answer. But then he exhaled, the weight of his memories pressing down on his shoulders. It wasn't a choice. We were tracking a derelict colony ship, the Arbiter's Path. It had gone dark 3 weeks prior after leaving a mining station on the edge of the galaxy. No distress signal, no warning. Just silence. A ghost ship. He paused, his voice heavy. The kind of mission that shouldn't have been ours. But when you're from Earth, you're the galaxy's go-to for the impossible. Humans thrive in chaos, they say. So they sent us. Just a squad of 12, chasing shadows in the deadliest part of the void. Marston's gaze swept the room. You think the abyss is just empty space? You're wrong. It's alive. And it watches. The gasiform being, whose flickering light had grown dimmer with each passing moment, vibrated faintly, its voice like the faint toll of a bell. Explain. What did you encounter? Marston's tone dropped, the room leaning in closer as he spoke. We found the ship. Drifting lifeless. Its hull was intact, its power systems functional. But the crew? Gone. No signs of a struggle, no signs of evacuation. Just empty halls. It wasn't until we reached the bridge that we realized something was wrong. The air was thick, like it didn't want us there. And then we saw the message. The reptilian warrior hissed. What message? Marston's eyes darkened and he raised his hands, drawing invisible letters in the air. Carved into the captain's console. We were not alone. The chamber fell into a stunned silence, the weight of his words pressing down on the assembled warriors. The Supreme Commander's hologram flickered faintly, her crystalline voice cutting through the tension. You're suggesting the abyss holds intelligent life? Not life, Marston replied, his voice cold. Predators. Hunters. Whatever they were, they weren't just intelligent, they were patient. They waited until we were deep inside the ship. That's when they started picking us off. The feline alien's tail bristled, its glowing eyes widening. Invisible enemies? Impossible. Nothing's impossible, Marston said, his voice like steel. Not in the abyss. We didn't see them, not at first. Just shadows in the corner of our eyes, flickers of movement in the dark. By the time we realized what was happening, we'd already lost 3. No sound, no warning. Just gone. The insectoid warrior clicked its mandibles rapidly, an expression of unease spreading across its features. How did you fight something you couldn't see? Marston allowed himself a grim smile. Humans are stubborn, remember? We fought back the only way we knew how, by refusing to be easy prey. We used motion detectors, set traps, and worked in pairs. They weren't used to that. They expected fear, panic, retreat. Instead, we gave them resistance. He paused, letting the memory settle in the room. But it wasn't just about fighting. It was about understanding. These things, they weren't hunting us for food. They were studying us, testing us. Every move we made, they adapted. Every weakness they found, they exploited. It was like fighting an enemy that already knew you better than you knew yourself. The gasiform being pulsed faintly, its voice a melodic hum. And yet you survived. How? Marston's smirk returned, faint but undeniable. Because humans don't just survive, we learn. We improvised, used the ship's systems against them. Flooded the corridors with plasma to flush them out. Rigged the engines to create a false overload, forcing them to retreat. We didn't kill them all, but we bought enough time to escape. The reptilian warrior's gaze narrowed. And the Arbiter's Path? What became of it? Marston's face darkened. We left it behind. Set the engines to self-destruct and ran like hell. The explosion should have destroyed everything, but as we left, I swear I saw something. A shadow moving in the flames. Watching. The chamber was silent again, the alien warriors exchanging uneasy glances. For species bred in structured societies and ordered warfare, the concept of an enemy that defied understanding was deeply unsettling. The Supreme Commander's hologram flickered once more. Lieutenant Commander Marston, your tales paint a picture of a species forged in chaos and defiance. Yet I wonder, what is it that truly sets humans apart? Your adaptability, your ingenuity, or your willingness to face the impossible? Marston's gaze swept the room, his voice steady. It's all of that and more. What sets us apart is that we never stop fighting. Not for survival, not for victory, but for the simple fact that we refuse to lose. Earth taught us that. And if there's one thing you should know about humans, it's this. You can break us, you can push us to the brink, but you'll never make us stop. The room fell into a heavy silence as his words echoed through the chamber. And for the first time, the alien soldiers began to understand what it meant to come from a death world, and why humanity's reputation was both a warning and a promise. The silence in the chamber was deafening. The alien warriors, bred in the crucibles of countless battles, sat immobilized. Marston's words were like shards of ice driven into the core of their understanding. The Deathworld human, standing unbroken, seemed less like a soldier and more like a force of nature, an embodiment of a species that had clawed its way to survival through relentless trials. Yet there was more to his tale. They all felt it. The Supreme Commander broke the silence, her crystalline voice sharp and deliberate. "Lieutenant Commander Marston, your survival in the abyss speaks to your resilience, but I sense there is more. What did you bring back with you from that darkness?" Marston's gaze locked onto hers, steady and unflinching. "The abyss changes you. It's not just the enemy you fight. It's the way it gets inside your head, whispering doubts, feeding your fears. But we brought something back, all right?" He took a step forward, his boots echoing on the chamber's metallic floor. "Before we left the Arbiter's path, I retrieved a data core from the bridge. It held the ship's logs, the last transmissions before the crew vanished. I couldn't make sense of it at the time, but once we were safe, I dug in. The crew wasn't just running from the abyss. They'd uncovered something. Something that wasn't meant to be found." The reptilian warrior hissed, its forked tongue flickering nervously. What could they have uncovered in the abyss? "It's a void, a region of emptiness devoid of life." Marston's expression darkened, his voice low and deliberate. "That's what we thought too. But the data revealed otherwise. The abyss isn't just empty space. It's a graveyard. A graveyard of civilizations that tried to map it, conquer it, or escape it. The Arbiter's path found remnants, structures, technology, fragments of species that had long since disappeared. And something else." The feline alien's fur bristled, its glowing eyes narrowing. "Something else? Speak plainly, human." Marston's voice grew heavier. "A signal. Weak, almost imperceptible, but constant. The Arbiter's path traced it to a massive structure drifting in the void. They called it the beacon. But it wasn't a beacon meant to guide. It was a warning. A warning in every language from species we've never encountered, all saying the same thing: do not wake them." A collective shudder rippled through the room. The gasiform being dimmed, its pulsing light slowing. "Wake them? Who are they?" Marston met its gaze, his voice like steel. "We don't know. And that's what terrifies me. Whatever they are, they're still there. Watching. Waiting." The crew of the Arbiter's path didn't vanish, they were taken. And the ones who took them weren't hunting us for survival or study. They were preserving us, cataloging us, like specimens. The insectoid warrior clicked its mandibles rapidly, the sound a frantic rhythm of unease. "And you left this beacon intact?" Marston's smirk was grim, devoid of humor. "We didn't have a choice. The structure was massive, ancient, resilient, and utterly alien. We barely made it out alive. Destroying it was impossible, and frankly, I don't think it can be destroyed. The best we could do was warn others to stay away. But you know what humans are like. Curiosity gets the better of us." The Supreme Commander's hologram flickered, her expression unreadable. "You think they will return?" Marston's voice was steady, but his eyes held a shadow of the abyss. "It's not a matter of if, it's when. And when they do, it won't just be Earth they test. It'll be all of us." The chamber descended into silence once more, the alien soldiers exchanging uneasy glances. They had fought wars, toppled empires, and faced extinction-level threats, but this was something new, something beyond their comprehension. Marston's words painted a picture of a predator not bound by time or space, but by an alien purpose that defied understanding. The feline alien finally broke the silence, its voice hesitant. "And what will humanity do when they return?" Marston's smirk returned, faint but resolute. "What we always do. Fight. Adapt. Survive. Earth didn't make us strong for nothing. We don't run from the darkness, we face it head-on. And if those things come for us, they'll learn exactly what it means to mess with a species forged by chaos." The Supreme Commander's hologram brightened slightly, her crystalline tone softening. "Perhaps it is not just humanity that will fight. Perhaps we have something to learn from you after all." Marston's gaze swept the room, his voice rising with conviction. "You better hope so. Because when the abyss stares back, it doesn't care what world you come from. It only cares if you're ready. And if you're not, well, you won't get a second chance." As Marston turned to leave, the alien soldiers remained motionless, their minds racing with the implications of his tale. The human from the Deathworld had left them with more than just stories, he had left them with a warning. A warning that echoed in the silence long after he was gone. And somewhere deep within the abyss, the Watchers waited.